And I have the privilege of introducing our CEO and founder and your moderator for the evening, Lee Corey.
For joining us. So let's invite the panelists to the stage. So I'm gonna get started with you. Why freemium? Does it work?
Yes, it does, for sure. And Segment was based on freemium. Segment was actually an open source, let's say, product, open source code at the beginning. And you mentioned also as a freemium product. And we're talking here in the context of like B2B SaaS, including like real companies that drive real revenue. It's most often the case that it's easier to create traction when you start at the lower end of the market, right? When you start by offering a huge value for a very little price, right? Because then you create a stronger force of attraction, right? And once you have that traction, you start proving your model and also proving through your users that your product has value, right? You can increase your asking price. But if you start by increasing the asking price first, it's super hard unless there's something else driving the conversion, right? So yeah, that's why freemium. And most of the time I see people actually do that. Start at the bottom of the market in terms of pricing, and then go up market. And that's exactly what Segment is doing right now. So Segment is like 4 years old.
So let me ask you why freemium doesn't work in your opinion.
Interesting. So when freemium does not work, I could say there's a lot of cases like that. If you have a very strong free competitor, often in the case could be Google, and you know that for a fact, right? And Mention also knows that for a fact, because Mention has Google does, of course.
And Segment knows that, right?
And Segment knows that too, right? And good tag managers. So it does force you, because there's a full free offer there. It does force you to do two things. Well, you're a business, so you have to extract revenue, because like Google is a business, but they can afford things that you cannot, obviously. And it does force you to create a much better product for a smaller audience. So you got to understand who your customer base is much better. Right? So I would say freemium probably does not work if you don't have a good understanding of who your customer base is, or if you don't have a large enough customer base. If you are working on a super niche, a small niche market, why the hell do freemium? Right? You need to handle those folks manually. Right? So if you are closer to a consulting service, or if your costs are high, right? Because you got to onboard each customer, and don't do freemium because you cannot afford it. Right? You're going to lose money.
So what is considered line? Like, what is the line between small business or medium-sized business and enterprise? This comes up all the time. People mix it up all the time.
It's a moving target. So I think it changes based on the age of your product and your company. So for example, the split between enterprise and self-service at Mention, and just to give you an idea, like Mention has like 500,000 businesses as users, which is like half a million, it's a big number, right? And like we had like 7,000 paying customers, and like the split was €300 a month. It's a low split, right? And that was the same split for Segment up until like probably last year, right? And now our split, it starts at $1,600, about $2,000 a month, right? But actually the median average customer value in enterprise is way higher, right? So as your product evolves, this split changes, and I think it's about like at the beginning you want to understand your customers, you want to afford, you can afford putting like some human people behind the phones to talk to customers, right? And that's what it is, right? Enterprise can speak, but the humans like flesh behind phone to call a customer, right? And then at one moment you can say, hey, now the people who I used to call to like close a few $100 deal, well, they're putting their credit cards in themselves. So like, why call them? Like, so you move up market and say, hey, now the limit is like higher. At one point, you actually still have human. So. But my hope is to eliminate the humans altogether.
Well, you know, Salesforce does that actually. I remember we were like a 3-people company, and I signed up for a Salesforce account. And I believe we had more than like 2 or 3 salesmen who reached out to us and tried to sell us. So
Yeah, we do that.
yeah, we should get to the minutes. All right, Ross, do you have a perspective on what's your perspective on enterprise versus small business? So Ross actually at Risk IQ moved down market. He did the opposite of what he did. He was at a company where they're selling $1 billion types of deals, and they realized that actually we should have started moving up market instead, and they started moving down from there. So why did you guys do that, and how did you have to change the product or the offering to reflect more on those market?
So I think in our case, this evolved organically. The company had a great history. We had evolved and were bootstrapped in many ways over the years, and had a portfolio of products. And like a lot of lean companies, we have developed different products, put them into the market, tested it out, and seen what the product market fit was. As we evolved, we acquired a company that looked like a really good fit with our product portfolio. And that product took off because it was largely a self-service model. And here we were comparing the metrics of the full suite of enterprise products where we knew there was a larger market to a product that was selling much faster but at much smaller deal size. It's much easier, much faster lead cycle to sell at 5K and under than it is for something that's 50, 100K, or 250K just to get in the door. That's a 6 to 9 month sales cycle.
How do you bucket those actually? I'm sure a lot of people want to learn more about how do you bucket types of deals. So we've heard, like $0 to $5,000, it can be a complete self-service. I learned from you actually about the $20,000 type of deals are called transactional deals. And then, can you tell us a little bit more about this bucketing?
Yeah, there's you kind of, if you grid it out, self-service is typically 5K and below. And then there's this transactional range of 5 to 25K you can do with very low touch, where people can come in and evaluate your service, but they're going to need somebody on the other end of the phone to do the transaction. They can't really do it on a credit card, and they're going to need some hand-holding, that it's a live person and all of those things. Then you get into enterprise sales that requires a field team. And that's typically in that 25 to 50K and above. You have to be kind of careful because when you're operating in that 25 to 50K, it can be hard to be profitable, if you don't have a fast velocity. So there's kind of a dead zone that you have to figure out. You have to straddle in that middle area. Again, we were in that enterprise sales area. Our strategy with our new product was more of a land and expand strategy. So people who typically move up in enterprise are looking to increase the profitability of their customer portfolio. We were looking at this product as a way to land new logos and then hopefully sell more enterprise services off the platform later. So some companies, that's part of the strategy and what they do. It's not the usual route to move from enterprise down to the mid-market. It's more usual to start in the lower SMB or mid-market and move on. Again, that happened organically. We had a lot of great products, and then this new product came in the portfolio, and we realized that we had a rocket on our hands, so what were we going to do? And that's why we did that.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to move to Tyler. I was sharing with the board how much I love your product as a B2C customer, and I'm actually very impressed how you guys managed to put it to basically move from B2C to B2B. It requires a whole different thinking and restructuring in the organization. Can you share with us about what did you guys have to do to migrate from B2C company to
Yeah, so I'd say the first kind of talk about land and expand. I think if we talk about freemium land and expand, the goal is how can you get your products into as many hands as possible. And I think B2C is obviously this shotgun messaging. You do end up getting it out there, but when you end up also landing in companies and there being 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, maybe hundreds of users at that company. At that point, you need a way to, the company wants to pay, it's not the individual anymore. So we first observed that companies were literally reaching out saying, hey, you have a corporate plan, when there was no business offering. And then second, the common thread, we have a company called Foursquare that's been a long-time user, including founders there. And it was a reimbursable expense at Foursquare for years and years and years. And eventually, like, hey, like, do you have a business plan? Rather than getting reimbursed every single year as an employee or teammate. So the first step was like consolidating billing, which isn't rocket science here, but the bottom line is it provides a convenience for the user as well as the company. And then you start to like look at the kind of foundation of this land and expand machine. I think similar with Segment. And then also, companies like New Relic, Twilio, if you can get a product into end users' hands, you lower the bar that there's no friction. You don't have to talk to someone. You don't have to wait for it to be, it depends on the company if you have to deal with the compliance and approval. And also what you're sharing using a product. But for us, it was seeing that there were hundreds of users at, or 5, 10, 20 hundreds of users at these companies, and then kind of bringing together that business edition, and then meeting the needs on the security side that the companies require.
Awesome.
I want to add to kind of something you said, which is you want to get the product in the hands of the user. And I was reading a marketing blog recently, and how many people have downloaded a white paper in the last month? I'm just curious. And would you consider yourself like a good sales target?
No.
I'm a white paper addict, right? Self-confessed, and I just signed a little thing saying I'm just a product manager, And then I read about my competitors' white papers. I read all this stuff. I put in my home address, and inevitably you get that phone call. I'm like your sales team's worst enemy, and you're far better off just taking that barrier down and giving them access to the product. And I think that's, this product marketing guy was saying, we're creating content, we're taking down all the paywalls, the information capture, the forums, everything. Because you're going to find out a lot more the second you start using the product.
Yeah, but it also depends on the type of customer. So if it's a enterprise, and we were talking about this earlier, like it's not necessarily that you want that in their hands early on. But if it's a small business, and then everyone's talking about go up market, go up market, go up market. Some of our customers is MailChimp, and I don't know if anyone saw the New York Times article on MailChimp a few weeks ago. But they're massive, 12 million small businesses, and they were pressured to go up market for years and years and years, and companies like ExactTarget went up market. Meanwhile, MailChimp's system growing with this actual beast of MailChimp. 12 million customers later and 400 million in ARR, and they didn't. But again, it's freemium. There's a basic version sent to 100 people on your list to start doing.
Yeah, I actually have a similar experience to that. We were in Lebanon, back in the day when we first launched Rubrik. Was myself and the co-founder, and at some point we got a couple of demo requests. One was from Electronic Arts. They actually reached out to do some contact form on the website. We didn't have a demo request because we could not do a demo from Lebanon. But bottom line, we had Electronic Arts and we had Virgin.com reach out, and they were like, okay, can we schedule a demo? Today I would love this, but back then they were like, no. Just try the product, and they didn't. So they were long gone. So this is to the point where you need to actually recognize when who you should be talking to and giving demos to. There's this level of customers where freemium doesn't work well. So back to Cloud App. What kind of engagement signals do you guys look for to identify if a need is actually qualified?
So quick kind of high level of the product. So we accelerate communication and productivity within teams by replacing text-based communication with quick annotated screenshots and GIFs, not like the movie GIFs, although you could capture those as well. The goal is to avoid that miscommunication. So we look at, as far as this kind of EQL, a user that's actually experienced each of these different benefits and these aha moments. So I don't know if anyone here is familiar with like the concept of pyrometrics from David McClure, 500 Startups. Definitely must. It's a good deck to go through, but there's a funnel which is AARRR, which is acquisition, activation, retention, then revenue and or referral inverted. And the first step to really understand the user is after they signed up, which is a kind of meaningless, it's the first step that they gave you their email address, but really trying to understand, did they go aha? Did they actually get the point? And more, knowing that most people are lazy, distracted, like you have seconds to really get someone hooked. So for us, it's to drive that aha as quick as possible. So it's like we effectively take the screenshot behavior and put that in the cloud. So we make that, instead of 8 steps of uploading something, dragging it to Slack, dragging it to Trello, wherever, we compress that to 2 steps. So our goal is to look at, did they actually create a screenshot? Did they annotate something, which is common, like how do I point at this, circle this, and create a recording. And what we find is if they've actually gone through those 3 events more than once, or made it to their what we call their like 10th drop, that's one of the main signals that they've gone aha. And if you take one step further and you look at users that are retained, and you actually go through the event history of what their steps were, you can re-engineer that activation behavior pattern to drive that through onboarding tours and so on.
That's smart. So what kind of engagement do you want to add?
Yeah, if possible.
Yeah.
There's like maybe 2 things I want to share. But really one is, I love what you said, and you have to recognize if you can get to the aha moment or not with that customer. And sometimes it makes very well back to like self-service and freemium. You can't, right? Sometimes that it's not the right kind of customer, or like your product is not going to work for that kind of person by itself, and you need to like handhold that customer. Right? And so that's what we're talking about together. Like in my current company segment, in my past company I mentioned, we have a separate flow for users where we know that they are high value and they will not get a good experience on the product by themselves. And so we identify those people and we try as well as possible to avoid having them go to the product and force them to demo. Right? And that works really well because they will have a better experience through a demo and they will avoid being frustrated. That's one thing. The second thing is that what you said is like reducing the time, the friction, time to aha, the time to value, right? And my past company mentioned, we actually did an experiment where so mentioned like a brand awareness product, we have to create an alert, like Google alerts and like with your brand name, and you get like emails about like your brand name, right? And we found out that most of the time, people were creating the alert too late after the product launch, and like, they did not get value. So what we did is that we scraped a product count, so you could probably know what's called the launches, right? We identified who was the owner of the company. We created an account and an alert automatically, and then we emailed them and we tweeted with a screenshot of the app, which was also automatic, saying, hey, Tyler, congrats for the launch, it's awesome, you know what, I love Cloud App, and we create an alert for you. Here's the link, if you want to go grab it, if you don't, it's going to be in 24 hours. The value of that is that the friction is minimal. There's nothing to do unless, just like I said, clicking on the link to get the value. So there's no friction. And there's proof of value. Right? In the screenshot, you see right away that it is valuable. And this was the number one, say, driver of like new sales acquisition when that worked.
Yeah, but your product team needs to like you to do that for you. It's not very common. I'm actually going to talk about this with you, Ross, from a product perspective. Who's responsible to make the engagement data available and like contribute to the identifying who's qualified and who should be talking to?
Yeah, so I'll jump into that, and then just say, I want to add too, just to what Young said, that Google did exactly what you described to me, and we were talking about this earlier. And I just think it's interesting a company that big would do it, because it's a self-service sign-up for G Suite of all tools, and I'm sure they don't call actively everyone who signs up for G Suite, and I have no idea why they thought I was a high-value customer, because I was setting up G Suite for a blog, but I did turn on like an advanced security feature. and probably that triggered it. And the only reason I was doing that is because I'm in the security business and all my friends would make fun of me if I didn't use that security feature. but you know, it just shows that there are ways you can check. I mean, probably only an enterprise would bother to do that. And so they called me and said, hey, can we help you sell a DMARC? We notice you're good. I think that's a good indication that even big companies are doing this. You know, about product managers doing this, a quick question to the crowd. How many product managers do we have here tonight? We have a couple. How many product marketing or marketing people? Lead generation? Sales? Looking at the makeup here. Revenue or growth? Okay. It's good to know, good to know. So it looks like about a half dozen of you guys are product people. You know, I think product qualified leads are your best friend. You know, this is definitely an evolution in the marketplace. If you've been in B2B, you know, I mean, the common experience for a lot of product managers in B2B is, you know, it's not the same as being in B2C. Your analytical contribution to the company can often be less when you only have a small group of customers to look at. And the joke, of course, in like high-end enterprise, where you've only got, you know, 5 or 10 customers, is you're just an order taker. I mean, you know, the product manager, you know, is that close to being a project manager, right? But this is changing in B2B. High-growth B2B companies are looking at broader bases. They're looking for ways to grow faster and have a larger customer base. And PQLs is an avenue to get in there. You know, we talked about earlier about, you know, it used to be that when you approached an enterprise company and said, hey, we want to go down market or something like that, oh, that's not our DNA, we'll never be able to achieve that. But if you look at PQLs as a way to achieve high growth, the land and expand strategy, then you can achieve a lot more logos more quickly, and you can help stop wasting your sales team's time by getting a larger group of users into that land and expand product, whatever it might be, and understanding them better by looking at how they use the product instead of looking at, you know, sketchy information from outside data sources that only tell you about the demographics, the account, the revenue of the company, maybe a title, what persona they are. These are all okay, but behavioral data about how they use the product is going to be a lot more valuable to the sales team. So, you know, in terms of implementing it, as product manager, your main value is to, again, be that voice to the customer, know the customer. You need to understand what features are that they can or can't live without. What are going to be your pricing triggers? Is it a certain user threshold? Is it a certain feature set? Is it the number of seats? And understanding what those levels need to be for your persona. Because if you set it wrong, you know, you're going to leave too much money on the table. You need to be able to optimize that. So that's a key component. The other thing is, you know, you need to work with your CFO. There's certain key metrics you need to be able to keep track of when you put that price out on the market. What is going to be your cost of customer acquisition, right? You have to have a CAC that you can recover costs on within typically 12 months, or the product's not viable. What's the lifetime value of the customer? If you've got a lot of churn, that can be an issue too. I mean, you want to make sure that you've got a greater than 3-to-1 ratio on lifetime value to CAC. And those are key things to work out with your CFO. You need to be able to, you know, if you're a startup, at least eyeball them, you know you're heading in the right direction, so that you don't price yourself in an unsustainable model. But those are the sort of things that product managers need to think about. And again, you're the one who's closest to this. And it's your role as the mini CEO of the product to drive the revenue. So these are things you need to worry about.
So it's the product manager who's responsible for this product or product marketing.
Yeah, you know, usually there won't be very many people on the marketing or sales side who will know this kind of data. I mean, someone who's looking at the user analytics. And, you know, it depends on who wears what title of the company, but usually the product manager is the one who's looking at product usage.
Especially for product usage, right? Like marketers don't have access to this data, or they can plug segment of the product, person has to plug the segment of the product. Yeah. Awesome. So I'm gonna go back to you, Tyler.
Real fast on that. So I think that's actually depending on the stage of the company. If you look at, you have product management, you have growth, And then you also have, obviously, your sales org. So looking at, if you're focused on engagement of a product, and you say marketing doesn't have access to the actual like product marketing engagement, like all these drip campaigns, all these in-app nudges, any type of content that's trying to drive behavior, like that has to still match with the product marketing benefits and so on. So it's, I think with the tools and stacks available today, you want more people in there and it not isolated. I mean, even on our side, it's like Scott, our VP of sales, like he's literally like, he's in Woobra every day, like looking at the events and the triggers to drive these touches to go into Salesforce, to go into our, we use outreach to fire off these sequences of messages if they're a PQL. So it's definitely, it's blurring the lines as far as like growth, product, and also on the marketing side.
I'm saying marketing people should definitely have access to that, but who's going to be responsible to make it available? Because today an average B2B company is implementing Marketo, and they're focusing on tracking a few form submissions on the website, and they're not there yet when it comes to tracking product usage, and we know people coming and asking for this with Woobra. And I feel that the marketer has always been like limited to the top part of the funnel, while when we're dealing with freemium companies today, the business model has evolved so much where the marketer has to actually keep working with the customers and touching the customers after they sign up and start using the product for a year or two down the line. So.
If you talk about like implementing data collection, if your organization has a growth team, it should be them. Because they are ultimately responsible for like driving growth, which is revenue. So which means that their goal is to find the most obvious problem in the funnel at each time and solve it. And if you can't construct a funnel and see where you have a bottleneck, well, you're not a good growth person, right? So if there's a growth person or team, they should be like maintaining and getting access to all the other teams and like empower them. Like giving them like funnels and data points and training them.
I think if there's one takeaway from this thread, it's data needs to be free, inside the org, and everyone needs to be able to have access to it. And this was definitely not free for cost, but it's like information needs to be free, right? And,
Here.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
That would break certain companies' business model, of course. But no, I mean, Ellie knows this. When we implemented web analytics in our company, we already had Google Analytics. We already had Gainsight that had a ton of information. We already had, as well. We had Segment as well. And but what we needed on top of those was a tool that worked well with Marketo, that worked well with Salesforce, and that would blend all of those together. And so marketing would have access, and so sales would have access, so that when marketing would look at lead scores, behavioral information was calculated into that. When a salesperson was calling someone, it's kind of the dumbest thing in the world to say, so how do you like the product? The salesperson should really know how they like the product, right? They should actually have that information. So it's like, so you guys are using a huge amount of volume on XYZ, or you're one of the heaviest users of XYZ feature that I've seen. So tell me about that. They need to be close to the customer, and an integrated web analytics tool like Woodfront can do that for you. But if you have to spend a lot of programming time to integrate your web analytics tool, those are the scarcest resources in the company. It's automatically a barrier to entry. So.
I want to add something on that, because like giving access is one thing, but actually training people to understand the whole funnel is where you get the real value. To give you a very quick example, most like medium-sized organizations work in silos. So you've got someone in charge of email marketing, someone in charge of advertising, and they don't know each other's like KPIs and core metrics, right? Which is like, so how bad is that? So give you an example of a campaign I created. It pulls the data from our email marketing back into our segment, right? So we look at all the people we email up to n times, so 3 times or more, but that opened 0 times, all right? And then we automatically stop sending emails, and we take that list and it's automatically added to a retargeting pool in Facebook. So we change channel from one to the other, and we do the same from Facebook, then to calling to sales, right? And it's only because there's someone who understands like the problems in each home. You all have like some good people who don't, your audience who's not getting emails, right? But who knows that you can actually add it to retargeting, and you can do like channel switching, and it works. Right? So if the people don't talk together around that they had issues with their bottlenecks, you're not getting the value that you could. So it's like empowering and training them, like have them look at like other parts of the funnel, and you get like huge value there.
Awesome. So Tyler, back to you. I think we need to ask this question. We spoke a lot about product usage and how we can leverage product usage to identify qualified leads. What are some other engagement channels that you guys look into, such as customer support, for example? This is one of the greatest signals that people tell you, like talk to you, and they will give you some satisfaction rating and stuff like that. So what other engagement channels do you guys look at?
Yeah, I think so. The overall theme is people generally don't want to talk to you unless there's a problem, or maybe they want to buy. So there's this like signal of a small window actually to talk. But we generally, it's outbound prospecting. They introduce you to decision makers. So like people don't want to talk. Like who has time to get on another like sales call? But if you have a way to be wherever you need to be in product, in app at the right time, and obviously service like Intercom. We use a product called Drift. These in-app chat, not on every page, but at the time and point, it's only on a pricing page, and they're there for more than 10 seconds, and you have a little window that pops up. Like that's a point where they're actually like thinking about pricing, not on the landing page, not on like a help desk area. So I think any opportunity for a conversation, definitely like through Zendesk, like we get any type of support tickets and engagement and touch point to make an impression. And obviously escalate that to an opportunity. Also, I don't know, does anyone here in the room do NPS surveys? NPS isn't any, who knows what NPS is? It's a NPS and Net Promoter Score, originally created through Bain. And it's the single most telling and corresponding metric to future growth of an organization. We use a product called Delighted. And it effectively, we batch and send out a number of surveys every day, week, to free users, individual paid users, and team members. And that simple question of how likely are you to recommend this to a friend or someone else? Tracking that score in your company OKRs and dashboard every week and talking about it. Now, if someone responds back with like, hey, 9 or 10 out of 10, and that's their response, and they're at a company and they're not paying it, like, they're really stoked, and there might be an opportunity to drive that into a thread. If there's also a detractor, that automatically creates a ticket in our help center, so we also look at that as an opportunity to like, what's gone wrong here, what aren't they understanding, and then also start a conversation. So I'd say any type of way that you can not force the conversation, but be there to engage once they kind of open up. So.
Do you have any answer to this question?
Yes, I automated NPS at Dimension, of course, and we use a tool called Satismeter. The benefit of that tool is that you can add a small, let's say, question after the NPS, which is, why did you give us that score? Right? And I don't care about the score, and I don't care about their answer to that question. Right? It has no value to me. It's just an excuse to like trigger an automated email behind that. And we only chose answers or questions to which we had an answer. Right? So if you just tell me like, hey, I don't like your product, then there's not much I can do about that. Right? However, for example, we had an NPS at the end of the trial, 14 days. Right? And one of the answers, if possible, if you gave us a score, is I did not have enough time. So what kind of message does that trigger? Well, of course, it triggers an email which is, hey, Tyler, I'm really sad you didn't have enough time. It's this one only time. I really think you're a great customer. I'm going to extend your trial, right? And that creates a debt, right? Because you say, hey, that cool guy is really going to use it this time. And we saw a huge increase in product usage from the people who actually selected that option. Right? We also had something on prices too high, we offered a discount, and like there's all those like automated emails based on the combination of score and choice selection, and that worked really well. And at the same time, we did churn detection because we had NPS every 3 months on paid customers, and we could trend over time their satisfaction. And when satisfaction dropped, we had someone reach out to them automatically. And the last thing is the NPS is fantastic. We have a large organization. So when we are like selling to companies where we have like 20 users, you usually have one champion, 2 champions maybe, but then you have other users, and if they give you a bad score, it's really important to understand that there is like growing insatisfaction in that account, even though your champion tells you everything is going well, right? And that's a fantastic opportunity because otherwise you never talk to those people, ever.
Cool. Ross, I have another question for you about the role of the product manager, how it has evolved over the last decade, especially to adapt with the new business models. You've been there, you've been on that front. Can you share with us like what changed? What was your job like 10 years ago compared to today?
I was laughing earlier because, as I took a query in the crowd, like several people raised their hand 3 times. And you can tell those are the people working in startups. Product management is interesting. It had an interesting history with the tech industry because, there's 2 different extremes. They start out with brand management, right? People managing CPG products that were responsible for the business side of it, the marketing of it, but also pricing decisions, cost and profitability. On the tech side, a lot of that kind of ended up with a project manager. And so you had companies like Microsoft calling product managers program managers, right? And that was the traditional role that started coming out. I mean, a lot of people know how successful Microsoft's products were delighting the consumer, right? They were famous for missing the mark on that compared to, like, say, Apple or a lot of the new companies that evolved in the 2000s. And gradually people realized that you needed someone to be the messenger of the market to the company, someone who would be the sponsor for the customer. And so that role has been the main role, especially in B2C, but also in B2B. And the evolution now, you see a lot of B2B startups in the Bay Area, and a lot of that is because of the consumerization of B2B. And so people ask, why is this trend towards consumerization of B2B? Well, the sort of myth is, we're selling to younger people, all those millennials are getting management positions in enterprises, and they're demanding a user-friendly product, so that's why. The real reason is growth. If you can consumerize your product, if you can make it available to a self-service market, if you can reduce the touch for the low-end customers, then you reduce the cost of acquisition. And so, there's a great SaaS survey, you can go out and check, Google it, it's produced by Pacific Crest, and you can check it out every year. They survey customers and they say, okay, what are the main sales channels that you go through? So out here, I'm just curious, what would be, you probably, I don't want to survey crowd, this kind of a hard one to ask, but you probably are thinking, the main distribution for SaaS is internet, right? We have that kind of stereotype out here in the Bay Area. But it's actually more biased towards the field sales team still, if you look at the whole market. And secondly, after that, it's an inside sales team. And then less than 20% of the market is still in internet distribution. So traditional sales is still very, very involved in SaaS. And their time is wasted if they're working on the wrong leads. So that is where this value for DQLs comes in. What I've seen in that survey is over time, you are seeing more people adopting a model that appeals to the mid-market, that has a low-touch transaction, bring people on board, so that you can then spend your best time on the high-value enterprise customers. For product managers, if you're in charge of growth for your product, you need to be involved. You need to know the KPIs for the product. You need access to web analytics to understand how this works and help with the right features into it and understand how the pricing that you develop is going to drive the product. So I think it's just an important part of the role for product managers who are involved in the strategic and business side of the product, not just the project management side of it. These are things you need to be thinking about to prove your value and help grow the product and grow revenue for the company. Everyone is part of the process. So if you're going to be integrated with growth, that's what you have to do.
It's actually funny, like maybe 15 years ago, I wasn't there, I don't know, but I've heard. You know, like product people were not directly involved or responsible at all for revenue, and I've seen this changing over time, and now the product person is actually the one responsible for the revenue. They want to prove that the product is actually generating revenue. Have you noticed this trend over time?
I think it's always been the case for brand-oriented and B2C companies.
Yes.
And I think the trend is showing that it's essential now for B2B companies. And nobody is better positioned in a company to provide these kind of metrics to help drive this growth and help the sales team better than the product manager who works most with the product. They may wear a different title in different companies, but the person who's responsible for being the voice of the customer and driving growth, that they have to contribute to this.
Well, on that side, we do something putting product managers on the line on the enterprise sales, because we saw our main competitor being able to take a customer request and do like a 24-hour turnaround on the customer request.
And they love it, right?
And of course, the customer loved it. It's like, those deals, and I feel like, oh shit, you know, it's like, how do they do that, right? Because like, at our organization, like the sales rep would sometime ask at the end of the week to a product manager, would sometime put it on his weekly sprint. It would take like a month or two, and so we're not committing to anything. And when someone comes and say, hey, I'm gonna like put like $300,000, you know, on your software on the next year, they expect a better service, right? And you tell them, yeah, this feature, you want it, we're not going to do it right now, maybe, right? And then the competitor says, yeah, sure, and then the next day they have it, of course we'll do the deal. So we started putting product managers on the line, and it works really well, and yes, we now have like a 24-hour turnaround on some features.
Yeah, it's interesting in B2B. I mean, you know, there's a lot of people call that feature blackmail, right? And but you know, at the end of the day, you know, you're responsible for your customer success. And you know, when you're in a business that has a small market, you spend a lot of time talking to customers. And you know, I've worked for organizations ranging from Cartoon Network, where I didn't really spend a lot of time with the customers because they were just too young. I wasn't the right target demographic. But you know, there, you know, being a product manager, you provide this incredible value analyzing the usage of the product and understanding it. I mean, yes, you do need to identify with the product. I mean, you have to be young and hard to do that, to make it fun and everything. But on the extreme end, I've been with companies where, I mean, look, we had, you know, less than 50 customers, and 80% of it was driven by 5 customers. And there, you know, you're spending a lot of time in those enterprise meetings, and you're taking that request, and your primary job is not to do the analysis of the market. It's just to translate that request into something that the engineering team can deliver. What PQLs does is it broadens again your scope of responsibility, so you're actually delivering a lot more value around the analytics of the product and how it's used, so that you can scale faster.
Okay, so we're actually running out of time, and I still have 6 questions for you. I just narrowed them down to 3. So there's one interesting question I wanted to ask you. How do you have like this one qualification formula for everybody, or do you have a different one for each person?
So we definitely have a lot of different kinds of qualification. And I think the easy way to understand that is, if you think of Mention, Brenda Wan's company, right? And you expect people to log on the app and see their alerts. Do you really expect the CEO of like a medium-sized company to have the same usage as a brand manager? Of course not, right? This is not going to work, right? And we were expecting that at the beginning. We said, hey, they've got this population, they're not logging on every day. We need to nudge them with emails, right? And so we're sending emails to CEOs saying, hey, you haven't logged on today, here's what happened, right? The horrible experience, right? And then we look at the title and say, oh yeah, oh wow, that's not what we should have done, right? So that's, I think, the extreme end, but definitely we started like creating profiles of what does a good user experience look like per persona, and then if you dive deeper, it's per individual, right? Because I hate personas when they do group a lot of people together. It's just like saying that we all have the same shoe size, right? But yeah, the idea is that each individual has a good usage, and you got to help them with that, and then you can measure what good looks like.
And who basically decides the qualification criteria for each persona as a degree of qualification?
Data. No, it's not so it's data. So we like create personas and we all like individual cohorts, the smallest possible, and then we look at the variances like who sticks, because we're in SaaS, right? So like sticking is like super easy to understand. It's like retention, and so you see like for CEOs at mention. Those who stayed longer were actually the people who were reading the emails, right? Because their behavior was reading the emails. It's not logging into the app. And so for them, that was it, right? And for brand managers, however, and like social BIs, they need to log into the app and react, right? So we looked at the stickiness, then we went backwards from the stickiness to see what does the behavior look like. Then we built models, so behavioral models, with a score from 0 to 1 that tells us if someone is like in the top or the bottom of their score. And then we can nurture them.
Awesome. Well, that leads me to the next question. What do you look for in data? Do you look more for quantitative data or qualitative data? Or a combination of both, of course. Like usually, you want to look for how engaged a customer is. We hear that all the time. We want to see how engaged a customer is. How do you define engagement? Is it like the quantity of how often you do it?
Yeah, I usually look
this is for everybody, by the way.
I usually look for quality, because quantity can be often misleading. Like for example, we have a lot of ghost customers in the companies that I've seen. I had segment people sending data, a lot of data, and then they churn. So you say like, guys, like surprising. Yeah, it was actually like, we forgot to turn it off and we're not using it. Right? So, and that happens often, right? People like out there, stuff happens, but it's not them, it's not indicative. So,
yeah, no, I'd say definitely it's a blend of quantitative and qualitative. We basically enrich all of our event data with a service called Clearbit, and also are able to push that through Segment, and then also Looper. And you clearly get a holistic view and can look at your funnels and engagement metrics to understand for an engineer, this is what their funnel looks like to end up at the end of the retention effectively, or for a product manager, or for that specific persona. And then on the qualitative side, being able to actually have those conversations and really building in the DNA of a product org to really regularly have those conversations with customers. So there's a kind of concept called like lean UX, where you have obviously product manager, you're designing UX, and also someone on the technical engineering side listening to these customer interviews. So you're really trying to build, it's like, do we do 1, 2, 3 a week? At least it's happening regularly and not just siloed. There's large companies we all know on Market Street that they're completely siloed, and engineering never interacts with the customer, and they literally get the specs and requirements and it's go build this. But that was actually early feedback that could have gone into that product lifecycle early on had they been involved, let alone also talk to the customer. So I guess it's definitely a blend.
From my end, when you're the product manager developing this, it depends on the business. And on the most simple end, it's just looking at what your price triggers are. Oh, this person's about to exceed their threshold. Somebody better give them a call. That's a very easy one, right? Maybe as product manager, you need to look at the data and be able to see what the curve looks like. What is the volume of transactions? And the business I am in right now, which is copyright enforcement, we're fortunate enough to have that data because it's all on Google. Google actually publishes it. So I know not only this data from our users, but my competitors' users as well. So it's a treasure trove of data. But it's not always like that. So sometimes you have to look only at your own data. At the extreme end, and this is not something I've got experience doing, I think this is more in the Jones area, you guys have access to this kind of data. But using machine learning and kind of figuring out things. Facebook is famous for saying that if you, I forget the trigger, but they wanted to see if a user made 3 friends in 7 days or something like that. They figured out that that was the sign of an active user. And but they did that through unsupervised machine learning, just looking at the data. And that's the extreme end. If you've got that kind of data and you can figure it out, that's great.
Awesome. So this is my final question before we get to QA. It's also for everyone. What are some creative ways we can leverage this PQL data to automate more? I mean, like the most common approach today is to enable salespeople and bring some PQL data to Salesforce. They will be able to identify those they can reach out to. How can we do more with automation, especially when we're dealing with freemium?
So my goal as a growth manager is to compete with humans as much as possible. It's honestly my goal, right? It's to actually cover as much as the business as possible, completely automatically. And so we have a model, a qualification model, which correctly predicts within 1 second of the sign up, 60% of our revenue within 10% of the users. It's pretty performant, right? And up to 80% of the business within 50% of customers, right? And so those 10%, so the 60% of the revenue, we send them directly to sales, right? So it's a very, very small number. The rest is noise, and the rest we can automate safely because we know that there's anyways the bottom of the market.
So is it like sales or no sales? We don't have something in between?
Right, well, the in-between only exists if you're not sure. Right? And that's what we call sales qualification, so they're going to take the time to call and then they're going to reject this, it's not big enough, it's not well enough. Right? Because we have this model which can correctly predict our revenue, we don't need to do that. Right? We know that when we send a lead to a sales rep, it is very highly qualified, and that is potential revenue. Right? So, which means that we can then automate. The other end of the thing on PQL is hey, all of those folks, so the 90% self-service mostly, how can we optimize their experience? And here we do use the model, and we use all the data from Clearbit. So as I say, if you are in B2B, please use Clearbit. It's the best data out there. And we use their data very heavily to change the experience of the user in the app and in the nurtures that we do by email. And that we double the activation actually at segment over 3 days by using the Clearbit data to change the experience for developers and marketers in 2 different paths.
What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, no, coming back to the Clearbit data. So an email address literally is all, you used to ask how many employees are in the company. Based off the domain of anyone that signs up in a product, you know quite a bit. You even know, what's their title, how maybe LinkedIn link, how many employees are in the company. So based off of that information, you can really kind of divide and look at, is this a kind of self-service, do they belong in this funnel, do they belong in a high touch, are they effectively a sales opportunity? And then really understanding the triggers to drive them through that funnel. And if it's someone that's in a company over 1,000 or 10,000 employees, we were talking about this earlier, you don't necessarily want them just toying with the product. They're not, there is a demo that needs to take place to really understand the benefits, the value prop, and really to get that aha that they might not have otherwise received.
So I kind of a limited amount to add to what you guys have said. I would say, for those of you guys who are in the startup arena, really important to pick a tool that's got good integrations for automation. You're not going to want to put programming resources on this. And it's really key to be able to trigger just the most basic and fundamental things. There is the email campaigns and the examples that you guys mentioned, and also just a very simple, chat for support or sales follow-up. And you need to be able to use your web analytics tool to immediately recognize who that person is that you need those kinds of triggers for. So,
awesome. What?
First off, thank you all. Phenomenal from all of you. This is relating to some of the premium stuff that we were talking about earlier, Guillaume, that you mentioned, but opening up to everyone. you talk about converting from a mostly freemium model to a pay model down the road after you've established a certain customer base at a certain size. What mechanisms would you recommend to do that without thinking about politically correct way to say pissing off your audience? Red Hat had a blog lately where they said this is basically impossible. Like someone had asked, why don't you charge for all your services now? And they were like, because our audience would hate us, and I kind of don't buy that. So I was wondering what you would recommend to do that while keeping them engaged.
Yeah, so two things. In both companies where I was in those past 4 years, we've increased the prices multiple times and significantly. Never a problem as long as the second thing happens, grandfather existing users. Right? Of course, the people who signed up for a plan, the good practice is grandfather them there. The new people that write is new pricing. I mean, it doesn't affect them what happened in the past. Right? And we did that at segment 6 months ago. Right? We increased the price probably like 3x or 4x, something like that. Right? You know that, right? Well, we increased the new self-service about the same amount, right? So like, no problem. But it's because now we have the awareness and the product that can support it. People say, well, it's worth it. We know it works. So, if the product follows, yeah. I've mentioned slightly more problematic. We increased the price 3 times in 1 year, and the product did not follow. So there was stronger competition for people like Water. And what happened is that we went from like mid-market to top of market in pricing, but the app stayed mid-market. And so people said, hey, at that price, I can have a better app, right? That's the thought. And avoid that.
Okay, so I have a question in reference to PMs owning the growth component that you guys have all been talking about. So for a company whose strategy is to go enterprise, straight up, like let's not even have a free product or limit our free product, what can a product manager do, or what advice do you have for PMs to promote this idea of a freemium model, of having a part of the platform that's open for people to be able to sign up and then to convert them? Do you have any advice for how a PM can basically own that and talk to execs and convince basically the business to turn around?
A good question to ask is, have you guys evaluated your market size and product market fit, and what are the board's goals for growth, and how are they going to achieve those? Have you looked at the average deal size, the sales team's velocity, and can you achieve that growth based on what you're doing currently? Those are some of the very first questions you want to ask. Very frequently, if the early deal sizes are too low and too slow, you're not going to achieve the goals. So that's a very early starting point. How many new logos do you plan to achieve in the next 18 months? If the number is too ambitious at the current sales team's rate, then looking at this model is a good way to go. It's not for everyone. If you go back to the grid of 5K, 25K, and 50K to 7 figures plus, there's people who play in that 7-figure range, and they're probably not going to do this. There's some great companies in the Bay Area that have a limited enterprise set. But there's also some great companies who have really broken model and proven that that this kind of self-service model works. In the security business, there are a couple out there like Splunk and Sumo Logic that, again, took what were traditionally seen as enterprise, high-touch, high-sales touch products and made them much more accessible to the mid-market. So I hope that answers your question. You're welcome to ask a follow-up or challenge me.
I think we're already. I'm just thinking about my company on a path where we are getting into those, let's just say, like 5-figure, 6-figure deals, and we have really good momentum. So I think it's going to be a challenge to also say, hey, we want to tackle the mid-market and the SMBs, But it's going to be a challenge to say, let's also develop our product or put resources on product development in order to make our free product more robust.
I think the biggest mistake I see with companies who are taking an ad hoc or guerrilla approach to product management is they confuse velocity with market size. Sales will say we've had this many run of good deals in this market segment, or we've had this many good quarters. But the reality is they were not selling the same product. They were selling multiple products, or they were not selling to the same market. Or they had three, they had 3 7-figure deals. But a race to a small bucket is not going to get you to the growth. And if the bucket at the end of the rainbow is small, velocity doesn't matter. So a lot of times people are forecasting that hockey stick because of the last 3 deals or last 3 quarters. But somebody needs to sit down and do the hard market analysis. Who are your proxies in the market? Have you done a bottom-up and top-down analysis? So I think those are really important things and questions to ask. Somebody in the management team needs to own that.
Yeah, one other thing to add, if we all know HubSpot, and obviously HubSpot's expensive software. They also rolled out their free CRM a couple of years ago now, and they were definitely very marketed and greater product. But the point is they knew the TAM is massive, and if they could give this kind of tease out, they could at least introduce you into that ecosystem. There's an opportunity, there's a relationship, there's a champion that's already using the product, and then in certain cases where there's a large TAM, and you can provide not the main offering, but a different offering. Even Clearbit gives this little Gmail sidebar widget to let you kind of kick the tires and experience it. I think there's an opportunity there, but again, it has to fit into a large TAM.
The other thing I'll add, this is kind of a tangent to that, but if you live in San Francisco, you may have noticed there's a new CRM on the market, and it was plastered on all the buses everywhere. Fresh sales, and it's really interesting to read the blogs on this. These guys actually, a lot of people here don't realize that they have a larger market share in the help desk market than Zendesk does. We have the home market, favorable image of Zendesk, but these guys have almost twice the market share out of us. It's something huge. And so now they're taking on Salesforce. What I found interesting about it is I was evaluating the product the other day. And first of all, there's only 3 integrations in the product so far. Segment is one of them. And there you go. And you read the blog from the CEO, why did you get into the CRM market? There's so many CRMs out there. It's well, we were a SaaS business for B2B, and we were running into problems with our own CRM solution. You could not find a CRM solution that did. Basically the model that we're talking here about tonight, which is PQLs. They wanted something very simple for a low-touch sales process that enabled the sales team they had to focus on high-value customers. And so some of the things that you focus on, and I'm a product manager, so when I read these pricing plans, I'm looking at it from, interesting, what features they put in this tier? I wonder how they came to that decision. But very clearly they're leading with lead scoring at the lowest tier. HubSpot, on the other hand, which is my alternate choice, is going to make me pay a handful just to get to the tier where I can do lead scoring. So it's not accessible to the SMB market or startups. I'm currently a startup now, so that's I'm living in that world. And sales, fresh sales looks very attractive. And again, they see the new trend in the market around this. And if you try and execute this with Salesforce or with HubSpot, you will probably pay a good bit more. If your company can afford it, that's great. But it's interesting that these guys see a broad base of small to medium-sized businesses taking this tack to the market.
I have a question on PEO. You mentioned a model that predicts sales performance and 10% of customers producing 60% of revenues. So can you unpack that a little bit? And how do you deal with false positives?
Yeah, so when I say our model, it's actually a company that provides us that for us. It's that called Mad Kudu, that's based in Palo Alto, Mountain View, excuse me, like 10 folks. And we could have that internally, but each time that the data scientist inside Segment challenges the model, they lose. So it gets doing a good job, right? And the value in outsourcing, and I built this device, they provide a fantastic API So we can actually have the score everywhere we want it, from like the website, the sign-up form, so it's actually less than 1 second, to the CRM, to the email tool, everywhere, right? So like, it's everywhere. What do you want to know?
Is it the company name? Mad Kudu?
Mad Kudu. The kudu is an animal in Africa, they're crazy folks, so Mad Kudu, M-A-D-K-U-D-U. And they work on top of both Salesforce and Segment, so they take the raw data from Segment. And of course, the model is built on Clearbit, so like all of those like 120 attributes is actually passed into Mad Kudu, and they run an aggressive analysis on the past 6 months of conversion, and then apply that to the future, which is why we're able to get the score in less than 1 second, because we take the email and the sign-up, we fire it to Clearbit, we get the payload response back, we fire it to Mad Kudu, we get the score, and we change the UI.
No, I think you guys have already touched on the topic of personalization, and on the consumer side, I've seen some pretty interesting things, like in the App Store, apps actually being very aggressive in terms of dynamic pricing, depending on your user profile and all sorts of things, which probably would be a bit more difficult in the B2B world. But I am very curious to learn a little bit more about some of the really cool sort of personalization pieces you've seen in connection with customer acquisition, where you can maximize customer LTV based off of what you know about them in real time.
Yeah, so I don't know if you know Clearbit a bit, they've launched a product recently which is called Reveal, which actually takes the IP address from the visitor and does like a kind of lookup, say not the usual lookup, but they give you the domain for any visitor, right? And it's highly performant, right? And when we have the domain, we can do exactly the same thing, which means that we are now able to know for more than 50% of our visitors which company they belong to, and we have the score because the score is based on the company, right? And so we're working on actually changing the page itself based on the company. So like Segment, we are like a marketplace, and so we automatically pull from another company called Datanize all the technology that you're running on your website, right? And we're actually going to change the homepage of Segment to feature those technologies. Then we know which industry you're on, so we can put the success stories first, right? And we know based on the company which competitors you have, and so we can look if we have a customer right there, we can feature that logo, right? And if you're in the top 10%, we're going to remove the pricing page, remove the sign up button, and say, hey, let's stop, right? Because there's no value in having that person sign up.
Yeah, just to echo that as well, just on the sign up, obviously knowing that someone has signed up and using certain technologies, that landing page using Reveal, or even in the drip campaigns you send out, like you can automate that based off the person. If this is an engineer, they're going to get different messages about engineering use cases. If this is a manager, probably going to send different messages with value prop.
Yeah. The challenge is real time. Is like you're talking on like what advertisers did with RTP, which I know you know pretty well, of course, right? And like we are running this round trip in around 300 milliseconds right now, and we're trying to handle it like a bit faster, so we can change the DOM of the first page load before the page actually loads. It's tricky, but we're almost there.